We all seem to have a ceiling. It's a ceiling beyond which we really cannot progress. And today we're going to discover, how do we break through that ceiling? How do we actually tear down that ceiling so that we don't have limits on how we progress as business owners and investors? And the way we're going to do this is we're going to discover how to improve our decision making by balancing conscious and unconscious learning. And we have the expert here with us on this, Margo Boster, who wrote the book Mindfully Successful. And Margo, really super glad to have you on the WealthAbility show today. And if you would give us a little bit about your background, how'd you get involved in studying the conscious versus unconscious mind?
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tom. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Yes, I'm an executive coach, and I work with senior leaders to help them be better bosses. And I also worked with other coaches as a mentor coach to help them be better coaches. So I became an executive coach about 15 years ago. Prior to that, I was a former techie and worked in information technology for about 25 years. And over the years, I realized that the technology world was fairly straightforward. It was challenging, it was interesting, but there was a direct line between the problem and the solution. And as I advanced through in different levels of leadership, I realized the people aspect was what was really complicated, complex, and challenging. And so I made a conscious decision to leave the technology space and go to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and become an executive coach so that I could work with these leaders and help them get through these challenges, these limiting beliefs that they had about themselves or their workplace.
All right. So I find it interesting that you don't, a lot of people talk about conscious versus subconscious. That's not your word though. Your word is unconscious. So what do
Right.
you mean by the unconscious learning? Because I think conscious learning, we'll get to that, but I think that's okay. I get that. I'm studying or whatever. That's intentionally learning here. What is this unconscious learning? How does it drive our behaviors?
Right. To answer that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain because this is happening in the brain. And when we think about how our brains learn and how we process thoughts and what's made up of our mind, we're constantly learning. It's believed that babies are born with only two fears: the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Every other fear that we have is learned. We didn't learn these because somebody said to us, you must have money or this will happen. That would have been a conscious learning. Somebody was telling us something and we were remembering it. We were learning this by what was happening around us, the environment, the messages that we picked up. And so somewhere along the line, we learned this belief. And the belief can be, it's fascinating because it could be what we think we were learning positive. You're the golden child, right? So, oh, you always succeed. Well, your unconscious learning in your mind now is, in order to be successful, I must never fail.
Hmm.
If you grew up in an environment where there was not much control or not much consistency, your unconscious learning might be, I have to control everything. And so unconscious learning is what our brain is absorbing simply by what's happening around us. Whereas conscious learning, like you said, it is somebody standing up there, we're teaching you, this is how you do these items. And after a while, conscious learning does just become the natural rote response in our mind, whatever we learned. But the good thing is there's a way we change this unconscious learning that you've had that's gotten in your way.
Well, so let me ask you a question about how this develops over our lifetime, because it seems
Mhm.
like so much of it happens during our formative years. This unconscious learning, because that's when our brains are so active and so malleable, right? We have that really strong neuroplasticity in the brain, the 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and then it seems to just get stuck in there. I told you earlier before we started that I've done a lot of personal development, but I'm fascinated in this whole area because I do think that business success and investment success comes from personal development. And that's where it comes from. It doesn't come from learning how to invest. Learning how to invest,
Right.
that's actually the easy part. I mean, like you said,
Right.
people are the hard part, numbers,
Yeah.
law, and I deal in numbers and law all the time, and probably do because that's always been the easy part to me, and the people part's always been the hard part to me.
Mhm.
So so I actually during my personal development process several years ago, I was with somebody who's helping me kind of overcome some things, and she goes, "So basically, your need for approval, we call that your approval whore. So you'll actually do anything."
Right.
You'll basically do
Right.
anything for that approval. And she goes, so we actually went back. And so what caused that? It was actually my earliest memory is my family leaving on vacation without me. So that's actually my
Oh,
first memory in my in
yes.
my in my life. And so tell me, so kind of would you help us understand is how that forms, and then we'll talk about, okay, what do you do about it?
Right. Okay. All right. This is not a short answer, so stay with
That's
me.
all right. Go for it.
Okay. I'm going to make it simple for understanding. So, of course, in your brain, you have the neurons that are dashing around all the time, sending and receiving information. If you were to think of your brain as a vinyl record, okay, so the vinyl record is grooved, it's got grooves in it. And those grooves were created over time. And now what happens is the needle is constantly playing in those grooves. So you mentioned neuroplasticity, which is very fascinating because the old thought was once your brain was formed, there's not much more you could do about it. That yes, it is more malleable in those early years, but you can change it moving on. So let's go and say that over time, what you were hearing, the message you received was that you had to have praise, you had to be rewarded, you had to have that external validation that you were okay, that you weren't going to be left. So those messages are getting grooved in your brain like that vinyl record. Now, every time things happen later in your life that's reinforcing that, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but it gets it deeper and deeper. And so these messages that we start out as children, they are reinforced. And then sometimes their message, the unconscious learning, which is what we're talking about, is how do these grooves get in these made in your vinyl record? Sometimes they're happened over a lifetime. Sometimes they can also occur by traumatic events. So the more traumatic that event is, and that can be either, I should say, how the more emotionally charged that event is, because it could be something great, but it also could be something perceived negative. It'll make that groove deeper and faster. So what if you can imagine your brain, it's just the messages are going in that groove that has been created over a period of time. And what those grooves are, that's what we talk about is the unconscious learning. That's just how I am.
So I'm curious. So one of my favorite books is the Five Love Languages.
Yes.
Great book. It's actually served me well. Do you think, I'm thinking about those love languages, and mine is words of affirmation, which goes right along with the need for approval, right? So do you think that might actually form that those love languages form because of these
Uh,
grooves, the unconscious learning that we're doing?
I haven't made that connection before, but it certainly makes sense. I have grandkids, and I look at my grandkids, and I started. noticing what their love language is.
Mm-hmm.
This one is gift, and this one is quality time. And it's interesting because the ages of these grandkids run from 4 to 10. So has that 4-year-old already gotten those grooves made from environment? So that, Tom, is a fabulous question that I'm not certain I have enough data to explore.
Well,
But
there you
that
go.
is, it's great. Yeah.
There's a new collaboration for you and
Sounds great. Yeah.
the author
Yeah.
of that great book. So, okay, so we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever age we are, okay, because
Mhm.
our audience is all of those ages. And we've got certain grooves made, right? I mean, they are what they are. So
Right.
first of all, so what's the process to discovering them and then overcoming them? Because it's those grooves, right, that are creating that ceiling for us.
Right. Okay. The first one is awareness. The first one is simply awareness of what those grooves are and what the triggers are. And so when I'm working with my leaders, a lot of the times the first thing is they'll say, well, I get angry when such and so, or I get upset when I get this feedback. And so the first exercise I have them do is for 2 weeks. Don't try to change anything and don't judge your reaction. Just notice. Notice. I recommend that they write it down. Some of them want to type it. Notice when that feeling arises. Just notice. Monday, 10 a.m., staff meeting with the CEO. That's all you have to do. Tuesday, 7 p.m., my kid came in. So you're noticing because the fact that these are unconscious makes you unable to do anything about them other than just say, that's how I am. So the first thing we do is 2 weeks, just notice without judging. And it's fascinating because a couple of things happen then. One is they may say, I thought that was really a thing, but I only noticed it twice in the 2 weeks. Well, we'll explore. Were they not occurring or were you just not noticing? But then the thing is that notice when they happen, are there trends, are there triggers? Once you notice that, then there's a couple of different brain training techniques that you can do. And one of them is I actually call it scratch the record. So I think if I'm also a visual person and we want to use our tactile senses also. So I suggest get a little figure or something that has a positive uh, connotation for you. For me, it was Yoda. I got a little baby figurine of Yoda. So now when I notice that, or just I'd have it with me and kind of just flick my flick my thumb across it. Because now what's happening is you're interrupting your thought,
Mm.
you're noticing it, you're actually doing a stimuli to counter it. And over time, it's like with that groove, over time, you are scratching that spot. So it doesn't just go down the same track. And you can begin consciously changing the narrative, the story that you tell yourself. So
So,
that's one technique.
so you've talked, you write about the importance of meditation and
Yeah.
becoming present. Is that part of the reason? Because meditation requires absolute presence, right? So with that presence, you're actually trying to recognize those unconscious thoughts and behaviors.
Um, Somewhat, but not totally. If we
Okay.
think about how the brain is made, and so we go through and we have what's simplistically is called the thinking brain and the emotional brain. Okay. The emotional brain is the limbic system that has the amygdala. It has all those parts that help you sleep, who help you regulate the visceral parts in your body. The number one job that this thinking brain or the emotional brain does is it keeps you safe. It keeps you safe. So your amygdala is this two little walnut sized things in your brain that every stimuli that comes through, it first goes through the amygdala the emotional brain, before it gets to the thinking brain. When we think about our brain, we're often thinking about the outside brain, the prefrontal cortex, the executive function, the part where we do our conscious learning. So when stimuli come through, it goes through the amygdala brain, which has all those grooves already in it, that says a big guy that looks like my abusive father is bad. This guy could be the biggest teddy bear, but don't have time to think that. So it's coming through the emotional brain before it ever gets to the thinking brain. I don't think people can see us, but I'm actually doing what's called the hand model of the brain that Dr. Dan Siegel has come up with. And I highly encourage your listeners to watch that, the thinking, the hand model of the brain. So how does meditation come in? Okay, is that when we're calling awareness to that event, that trigger thing, we are still working with the outer brain, the thinking brain. Okay. But when we are meditating, what we are doing is quietening that thinking brain and letting the emotional brain rest. So you had that amygdala that said this stimuli is dangerous. By meditation, you actually can kind of calm down that emotional brain so that there is less emotional reaction. You are also noticing, so you're practicing your thinking brain to notice before you react. Great brain training.
Yeah, so you talk about that a lot, about noticing. So when you're in, let's say that you're interviewing somebody. I know that's one of your examples. So you're interviewing somebody, and they're late, or they pronounce your name wrong, or they do something that is annoying. You talk about, don't judge it, just notice it. So
Mm-hmm.
can you kind of go into that a little bit as to how you, because that's hard, right? It's hard because, like you say, it starts with the emotional brains, and I know entrepreneurs tend to be a little more emotional, I think, in a lot of cases, because I mean, that's, we're out there doing things, we're taking risks, we're working with people constantly. And so, emotions play a large part in that. So
Yeah.
how do you quiet that so that you actually notice it and make a judgment later rather than make a judgment on the spot?
Right. And I'm going to elaborate on this answer a little bit because my husband, um, he's my biggest supporter, but he's like, I just don't get this noticing. What difference is it going to make if I notice what they're doing over there? Because what happens is that through those years of unconscious learning and some conscious learning, you have those grooves in your mind, in your brain. This is the path the neurons are going to take. So your brain is made for efficiency and to keep you safe. And so it is designed to make rapid judgment. Okay. If a dog is jumping out at you, you don't want to sit there and think, is that bad or not? Your brain says you got to get safe. There's no fence behind between you go. But what happens over time is we get so fast in our reaction that we are basing our reactions on old data. We're not basing our reaction on what we did, what's happening now with the events around us. So somebody's late for a meeting. I'm so sick of everybody being late all the time. No, 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 no. This individual was late today. So why are you taking out on them all that
Mm.
history that's ever happened with you? So by training your brain, because I also have a noticing exercise that I talk about in the book, and it's just of noticing. It's training your brain to slow down and notice so that you are not just always reacting to the past. You're really responding to what's happening now.
All right. So you mentioned one tactic. I'm going to go back. Let's get a couple
Okay.
of other tactics that you can use Um, I love it. I have really good partners that they're very good at noticing. And one of the things that I've done is surround myself from people that don't have the same grooves that I have.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
so they've got their own grooves. Don't get me
Mm-hmm.
wrong. They've got their own grooves. You know, they may be more perfectionist than I am. They may be, you know, they have to have all the details done, which I don't. You know, I don't care about details. But I get it, right? So can you talk a little bit about the people that you're around and the environment you're in, and how that impacts what you can do from a conscious and dealing with your unconscious learning?
Yeah. Well, when I deal with busy leaders, executives in charge, whether they are entrepreneurs of owning a small business, if they're the founders and the entrepreneurs of a large business, if they work in large organizations. And what happens is that they get busy, and the story that's told for them is to be successful might be because I get a lot done. I'm efficient. Okay. I'm creative. I have the answers. And so it's really my suggestion is a daily repetition. I have a technique for many of my executives. Um, Take 6 minutes, 3 minutes in the morning. You drive to work, you get park in your garage or your parking spot before you go into your office, or if you wander down the hall to your space at your computer, before you open it up, set your timer for 3 minutes and practice noticing your breath. Because we've talked a lot about the brain today, we haven't really talked about the impact that the breath and the body have on the brain. So 3 minutes, set the timer and notice your breath. Just slow down, inhale fully, exhale for 3 minutes. What you're doing is through your breathing and your body, you are sending the message to your brain that you are safe. Okay. It's also giving you the conscious practice of slowing down. So do that 3 minutes in the morning. You go about your day, you're going to have some hits, you're going to have some misses, you know. At the end of the day, either when you get in your car before you drive home or when you get home before you walk in the house, 3 minutes. And it's amazing what those 6 minutes a day will do for you to help you reset. And over time, what's interesting is you do this, and I'll add in meditation too, it's a cumulative effect. Just like those negative grooves or any of the grooves were cumulative, this becomes a cumulative effect where you over time are less reactive, that you do pause as you should. So that's a good start. The other is I firmly believe in meditation. Uh, I say a minimum of 20 minutes a day, but if you start with 5 minutes a day, that is excellent. Just do it every day, because now what's happening is it is calming your amygdala, your limbic system, and it is training the brain to be still or to not react. Your brain will never be still.
So so we know some great athletes who've done this, right? We know
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you know, notably Novak Djokovic. I think Tom
Uh-huh.
Brady use that as well, but they use it. It's every day over a period of time. It's not like one
Right.
day and one and done, right? I mean, it's more like
Absolutely.
you're actually training your brain. It's almost like you're training your
Yes.
brain to slow down and to notice things. How soon? So for those of us who are anxious to get results, how soon do you think people start noticing that
Yeah.
difference? And I'll give you a perfect example. So my wife is the calmest person I've ever met. I mean, she comes into a room and the whole room calms down.
Mm-hmm.
But she does yoga meditation every day, right? And she has
Yeah.
for 25 years, right?
Right.
So that is her kind of secret weapon
Yes.
right there.
Yes.
So how long does it take before you start seeing that and start feeling a difference in your um, uh, maybe reaction?
Yeah. That's an excellent question for which there is not a defined answer. But I will say a lot of the research because there's been a lot of scientific research about the impact of meditation. And so the research is generally, if people meditate for 30 minutes a day, what happens after 30 days, what happens after 6 months. And so the most of the research surrounds on at least 30 days of meditation. It's like any exercising any part of your body, is that it's going to happen so slowly. You don't suddenly realize one day you went to bed anxious and the next day you woke up calm. It's going to be accumulative over time. And one of the things I also recommend is journaling at the end of each day. And journaling doesn't have to mean writing a novel each night. It can be simply jotting down 3 thoughts about the day. And the power of that is that over time, you will be able to look back and say, oh my gosh, I can't remember. I didn't realize I was that high strung. So I would say try it, as much as you can, give it time and continue it.
Right. But it sounds like, I mean, after 30 days, maybe you look back and say, okay, let's examine what I've gained over the last 30 days.
Right.
And then, after 90 days, what have I gained over the last quarter? My friend Dan Sullivan, who's a strategic coach founder, he says that entrepreneurs, we tend to get into a gap because we're always looking at the future. He says
Right.
we need to live on the gain, which is what we've accomplished in the past, and it will calm our minds. It settles us, and then we can say, "Oh, I've accomplished all this, right? That's now I'm happy, right? Because I can look at the past as the positive, as opposed to looking at the future, which will never get there, right? We never
Right.
get to the future. We only have what's today and what's in the past. So, what other tactics or thoughts do you have for leaders who they're trying to break through this ceiling that we've all created for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
And let me give you a simple example. So I'm at a seminar the other day, and I'm sitting next to the guy. He goes, "Money always comes to me. I never worry about money because it just comes. It just comes." And I've known other people like that. I have clients like that. But then I have other people that are constantly trying to get rid of money. So, I mean, literally, it's like, why are you always poor? You are like, you like have this groove in your head, right? Your groove in your record that
Mm-hmm.
is money is bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do you go about changing that? That's right. Taking the conscious learning to undo the unconscious
Yeah.
learning, right?
And the challenge with that, particularly when you're talking with entrepreneurs, is entrepreneurs, and I've been one a couple of times over, is we set goals. Okay. This is what our sales is going to be. This is what our number is going to be. We have to set goals to know where we're going. And so it's very definitive. How do you really define the shift within yourself? And it happens over time. There's a saying, the years teach much that the days will never know. And that is so true. And so I think what's helpful is if people do take time to do a periodic self assessment. You have your monthly business reviews, you have your quarterly projections, you do a monthly personal review. And go back in every day. You started with your 3 minutes a day, you of breathing, or 6 minutes, 3 minutes in the morning, three in the evening. You've begun your meditation. And at the end, you've journaled every day. Just write a couple of things. Every month, pick the day of the month, the 15th of the month, you're going to you're going to take 2 hours and do a personal reflection. And you're going to go through and notice, oh, well, I do feel a little better. I'm sleeping a little better. And some of the benefits you may not be able to specifically quantify. I'm making better decisions. So implement some of the practices. I talk about a number of them in the book: the naming, the noticing, the scratching the record, the breathing, the standing, and keep a daily 3 things that you've noticed during the day about yourself, um, and have a monthly personal review and see. You will, with that awareness and commitment, you will begin making improvements. Are you going to be able to see it on a bottom line? I think you will, but just because you're going to be spending your time and energy on the things that matter to you, not what that old story was that you have to do or you can't do or you should do.
So one last thing I want to ask you is,
Okay.
so we're very busy, and my experience with entrepreneurs, because they're all my clients, is that one bad decision uh, really can mess up a lot of good decisions. Uh, I mean, one bad decision will overcome 10 good decisions. So, but in the crisis moment, right? In the crisis, how do you train yourself? And it may just be what you're talking about, but what do you, are there things you can look for in that crisis moment? Say, wait a minute, I'm going to stop and I need to do this. Because
Breathe.
you mentioned I need to notice it. Here it is. But, it's a crisis. Crises typically aren't 15-minute crises, right? They're 15-month crises, right? They don't go on just, you go into a recession. It's not a recession recession by definition, it's 2 quarters, right? So maybe your business goes into recession, or your marriage goes into a recession, or whatever part of your life is in this downturn. How do you train yourself so that in those really most difficult moments, you're not back to that amygdala and going, wait a minute, I need safety here?
Right. That's right. And one thing I always say is that it's helpful to begin to develop these practices and train your brain, body, and breath when life's going easy. So that then when these things do hit, because life is messy, then you are at least in a better condition to address them. When things are going crazy in the moment, the number one thing you can do, and it sounds too simplistic, is breathe. The way you breathe affects everything about your body, about your brain. If you're breathing from your chest, you get more stressed. When you get more stressed, you're making less good decisions. You're not sleeping as well. Your blood pressure goes up. Your health goes down. When you're breathing fully, you are sending the message to your brain, the amygdala, everything's safe. And so it sounds simple, and it's an easy act to remember. I've got to breathe.
All right.
But
So
it's not always simple.
here's what I'm going to ask you. Let's finish off with this. Will you take us through a breathing exercise?
Oh, sure. Well, we'll do a simple, how long you want? 1 minute, 30
Sure.
seconds,
A minute's
1 minute.
fine.
Okay, I'm going to time. Okay, so this is a very commonly used breathing. So sit up straight, because you want to have your chest open enough so that it's telling your body, I'm safe. If you're comfortable, close your eyes. If not, gaze down so that you're not distracted. Take a couple of normal breaths. Now we're going to count our inhales. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, and pause. 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, and pause. 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, and pause. 2, 3. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, and pause, 2, 3, 4. And just do a couple of more rounds on your own at your own count. And then when you're ready, open your eyes and return to normal. That technique is called box breathing. It's used by the Navy SEALs, the Air Force fighter pilots, a lot of first responders. And what it does is it resets our body to a healthy state.
Well, thank you.
Of course, in my book, I talk about a number of other breathing techniques to use for different times, for confidence, for humility, to wind down.
Well, thank you so much, Margo. Margo Boster. It's margoboster.com, right?
Yes.
And the book is Mindfully Successful: Unlock the Power of Your Brain, Body, and Breath to Elevate Your Leadership. And I'm going to add on my own tagline and break that ceiling, whether it's a glass ceiling or whatever kind of ceiling it is. Let's get rid of those boundaries. But we do that with the personal development and really, as you say, mental fitness. So thank you so much, Margo. Really appreciate all of your work in this area and your time with us. And thank you, everybody. Be sure to send this to other people. I think this has just been a fabulous show, and watch it, listen to it over and over again, and like us and follow us. And we are happy to provide more of these shows at the WealthAbility Show. And remember,
thank you, Tom. It's been my pleasure.
And then remember that when we do these things, what the ultimate result, it may not be the goal, but the ultimate result is we'll always make way more money and pay way less tax. Thanks, everyone.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.